Noisy, it was good. Learned a lot, couldn't hear anything. Too many interruptions. Insightful. Okay. So, okay, the way we're going to do it today is okay, thanks for the responses. So today we're going to be doing something really interesting, which I love a lot. And if you have any questions, you can just note them down so that at the end of the class we can, take all the questions together. Is that fine by everyone? But if you see something I'm doing and it feels bad, not like bad, you don't understand what I'm saying, then you can just leave a question in the chat and I hope to see it. Yeah, all good. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen and let me know once you can see my screen. Where is Figma? Can you see my screen? Sorry, I'm so not used to this. Okay, let's begin. So we're going to be talking about a few things today. One being the box model, one being shapes, another is shadows, and another is components and variants. Right, so the box model itself is pretty simple, to be honest. It's talking about margin, padding, and how you fit your content into that. So I'm going to show you a picture that describes everything I'm saying. Yeah, so looking at this is a typical box model, and you have your content in here, right, with some padding. I would explain it better. And that padding has a border, and then you have a margin. So what this means is this. So say, for example, I have a button, right? And I gave my button some color. Let's say this, for example. Looking at this model, right, comparing it side by side, the text here is the content. The padding is the space around the button, like inside the button, if you get what I'm saying, right? So right now, if I zoom in a bit, you can see we have a padding of 8 pixels all around, right? If I put in another button, for example, the spacing between this button and this button is 10, and we can say that's the margin. Is that clear? So when designing the button, I can say I want my buttons to have 10 pixels all around, right? Something like this. Let me change this. For some reason, I can't see the chat box. So I'm not seeing anyone's message at the moment. But let me know if you have questions. Design Power, is this something you can help me with? Annotation request. I don't know what that is, so let me put it by the side. Yeah, so you can decide to, adjust this. So right now, the margin around this button is 11 on top. This is a bad margin, but just for example purposes, right? So it's 11 on top, 12 at the bottom, 10 by the left, and 8 by the right. That is your margin. Your padding is what is around the content, like inside the button, right? And that's pretty much the box model. It's nothing complex. It's quite straightforward. Now, when we talk about shapes, it's another basic stuff as well. We have quite some shapes in Figma, rectangle, the ellipse, polygon, star, and the likes. We all know what the rectangle looks like. You can use this to draw a square as well. I wouldn't really, arrow is a shape as well, yeah. Ellipse, there's something about the ellipse. So when you draw a circle, for example, you see this little arc or this little dot. What you can do is this. You can cut it into, what would I call this? I don't know, but you can make it like a semicircle. You can do whatever you want. And you notice that when I moved the arc, you have like 3 other points, right? So one is the sweep, which is for this. So you can imagine when you're designing like dashboards and you want to do like a pie chart, something like that. So this would be very useful. Then you have the start position. So this depends on how you want this to move. It's not changing the shape, it's just changing the position of that you've removed or taken off the shape. Yeah. While this one is called the ratio. So if I drag this down, see what happens. You get like a ring, sort of like a ring, right? So this can be very useful when designing dashboards or you're designing like loading states. Like when it rotates, the loading button. I'm sure you've come across it several times, right? So something like that works. And you have other things like the polygons. So when you draw the triangle, you can come over here. This says the count. So the more you increase it, the more the shape changes, right? That's why it's a polygon. And yeah, you have the star as well. And you can also change the number of sides, right? Depending on what you want to achieve. You can change is it the thickness? Yeah. How slim you want the star to be and all that. And you can also draw custom shapes, right? You can, so for example, if I have an ellipse, right? I can hit enter on my keyboard and you would see some little dots around it, right? So moving any of this makes you get a custom shape.
Hello.
Did someone say
Yep.
something? Okay, so moving around any of this makes you get a custom shape. You can move the handles as well to, to get whatever you're trying to achieve. The same thing goes for the other shape. So you hit enter to get out of that this view, because right now you have this, you have pen, pencil, you have the bend tool and paint bucket. You can just, experiment with some of those things. You can do the same for this as well. Hit enter, you get the dots around and you can move it however you want, however you wish. So it's pretty something you can play around with. So yeah, that is shapes. Yeah, so shadows. This is what I want to focus on the most, components and variants, because it's super important. So when it comes to shadows, I'm going to recommend a book for everyone to read. It's called Refactoring UI. It talks a lot about different things that has to do with UI design, and it speaks a lot about shadows as well. There's a chapter dedicated to shadows, and it's really, really, really interesting, right? But I would show you some of what you really need to know about shadows, or let me say the basics of shadows, right? So if I have a white box, a white rectangle here, Let me know if I'm moving too fast so that I can slow down. So we have a white rectangle. Yeah, and I want to make it more visible. Yeah. All I have to do is on Figma, come to effects, right? And you can see it automatically applies a shadow. You have different effects. You have the inner shadow, the drop shadow, the layer blur, background blur. But what we want right now is the drop shadow. So now that it's selected, I can click on this little icon and you can see X, Y, blur, and spread. Now, what X means is, like in graphs, you have the X axis, you have the Y axis. X is horizontal and Y is vertical. So if I move the X, if I increase the value of the X, you'll see the shadow moving to the right, right? Moves to the right. And if I reduce the value of X, it moves to the left. The same thing goes for Y. If I increase the value, it goes down. If I reduce the value, it goes up. Now, this means that um, I can make my rectangle look like it's some is higher than some others. Like if I have several rectangles, I can make one look like it's popping out more than the others using the X and Y values. So an example is if I make Y 4 over here and I make Y, I make another rectangle. If I make Y 0, to an extent, it looks like this pops out more than this, right? And that's what your X and Y value does for you. It gives you that depth effect, right? So let us explore more of the options. Now, blur, what does blur do? Blur makes the shadow softer, right? So if I take this is more obvious, and I increase the blur value, you can see that the shape of the shadow has gone from the regular rectangle that it was to something different. You can't really tell what shape it is. If I take it down to 0, you can see it's the exact shape as a rectangle. But the moment you start increasing, it gets, a different shape, right? And in reality, shadows are not totally defined. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. But yeah, it loses that shape and that makes sense, right? So you can make your shadows softer by reducing the transparency percentage. So right now it's on black, right? So you can either reduce it directly from here or you can come here and, reduce it to make it soft. Is everyone still following me? I wish I can see the chat box. Sorry, chats. Okay, I found it. The tools are tiny, can hardly see anything. Can I go back to the first button? Clotilda, can you type your question again? Because I missed it. What didn't you understand by the first button? So I don't move too far. Okay, you understand. Okay, perfect. And someone said he can't see anything. So I would move my Figma to a smaller screen so you'd be able to see it. Give me 1 second. Can you still see my screen? I just want to make sure everyone can see it. Please create the circles again. I missed that. Do a recap of the pie chart thing after the lesson. I believe it's being recorded, so you would definitely get the recording. All right, so not to drag everyone back, I will just do the circle thingy again, right? So you have a circle. By the way, it would be good to know some of the shortcuts, right? So O is for circle, L is for line, R is for rectangle. So when you click on the circle and so right now I'm holding Shift and Alt to get a perfect circle that increases from the center, right? I believe I should tell you some of these things, because if I don't do that and I just drag a circle, I'm getting different shapes. Not like different shapes, but not a perfect circle. But if I hold Shift, you can see it gives me a perfect circle and it expands from the top left, right? But if I hold Shift and Alt, it expands from the center. Make sense? Yeah. So if you zoom into the circle, you would see this little button called arc, right? And once you click and hold and you move, you get this little sweep. It's called sweep, and you can see the percentages increasing the more I move it. So this is good for your pie charts, like I explained, right? Then you have the start. So right now the start position is here, but I can decide to move it somewhere else. You understand? Then you have this, the ratio, which makes you, get this kind of ring thingy. I don't know what it's called. Yeah, but like if you want to design a loading state, for example, you can have a state like this and another one like this. Then when you prototype, you get the rolling effect. Is that clear now? Ishaolua and Fatoimbo. I don't want to move too fast. Okay, yeah, perfect. Awesome. So back to the shadows. I know what's the problem. Okay, everyone says it's very clear. I think the meeting is being recorded at the moment, so you would definitely get it. You definitely get it. All right, so back to the shadows. I believe we all understand what I've done so far concerning shadows, right? So we have two different rectangles here, and this one has X value of 0, Y value of 0, which means it's perfectly behind the card. It has a blur of 4, and it has a spread of 0. Now, we've not talked about spread. For this, let me increase the transparency to 50. If I increase the spread value, can you see what happens? It's kind of like it makes the shape bigger. I don't know if that makes sense to you. So initially, the shadow behind the box was kind of like the same shape with the rectangle. But the moment I start increasing the spread, it mimics, it gives this kind of view like the shape is getting bigger than the rectangle, which in a scenario it is. And if I decide to increase the blur, you can see the difference. So let's take the blur back to 4 and this back to 0. Right? So so what I want to show you right now is the one quality player that I've seen really signed up. I'm sure you know him very well. Okay. So the next thing I want to show you is let's look at this. Okay, let's look at the value. So we have blur of 20 and transparency of 11. So let's do the same thing for this one. I'm driving at something and you would understand now. Blur of 20, transparency of 11. Right? And for this, let's make it a bit more obvious. So increase the Y value. Can you see it? It kind of looks like it's popping a bit more compared to to this one. If I do the same thing, so to duplicate, you can either use Control D, right, which duplicates the rectangle. So what I did was Shift and drag. So Control D first, you can see it says duplicate selection, then Shift, Hold Shift, and drag what you've done. Or you can click on what you want to duplicate, hold Alt, right, or Option on Mac if using a Mac. Hold Alt. I like to hold Shift as well, because when you hold Alt, you have the freedom to move, which is fine. But I want this to be just beside it and perfectly beside it. So once I tap on Shift, you'll see what happens. It's, snaps to the parent or the component is duplicated from, and I can move that to be, in the same, make sure they're on the same line, sort of. One thing you can do is, so for example, I want this to be the same distance from each other. So right now, if I click on this and I hold Alt, right, and I hover my mouse over this, it shows me the distance, which is 6, which is the margin we talked about, yeah? So it says this is 6 pixels from this. And if I click on this, hold Alt, and hover my mouse over this, it shows me that it's 8 pixels. So we have like different spacing between each of them, which isn't bad because it's an example. But one thing you can do if you want to quickly, align things, you can select the 3 of them. I just dragged my mouse over the 3 of them, and you come to this plot, these 3 little rods or lines. You click the more options, and you can see you have tidy up, you have distribute vertical spacing, distribute horizontal spacing. What we want is the horizontal spacing. So you click on this, and you can see immediately you get this option. You get this option, which is the spacing between them. Let me change it. Initially, it wasn't there. Rita can't hear me. Can any other person hear me or not? Okay, so Rita, it means something is wrong with your setup. Okay. So when the spaces are unequal, you can't see me. Okay, I'll probably turn on my video. Can you see me now? Okay, awesome. So when the spacings are not equal, right, you won't get that. You won't get the option I showed you before. But once you select the more option and you click on the distribute horizontal spacing, it does that automatically for you. And how you know is you get this option which wasn't there before. So it says right now there are 7 pixels, from each other. And you can see once I hover my mouse on the icon, I get this little arrows, right? And once you click and drag, you can see what it does for you. It's, helps you with the spacing. Yeah. So it's currently 7. I like it's 8 because there's something called the 8-point grid, which I know is off topic for now, but I hope we get to talk about it in upcoming lessons. Or the 4-point grid, right? So you see that 8 or 4 because 4 is divisible by 8, and anything divisible by 8 is divisible by 4. Makes sense? Yeah. Okay, so back to the shadows. Back to the shadows. Let me increase the value from 10 to something big. And if you look at it properly, you can tell that this pops a bit more than this, and this pops a bit more than this. Yes, I believe the class is being recorded. So what I want to show you now is how to store local styles, right? And then we move into components and variants. So right now, there's something called in design, there's something called a design system. Those familiar with graphic design, you call it like brand guidelines, sort of, yeah. But for a design system, you really want to store all your values somewhere. You really want to, not keep repeating the same thing over and over and over. Because right now, if this is a card and I have some designs in here, and I want to use this same card somewhere else, I don't have to recreate it all the time. Yeah, that's where components come in, and that's where local styles come in, right? So first of all, the local style. Now, this shadow has 0y, 0x, and blur of 20. So what you can do is, yeah, you can type in your question. I would answer it. What you can do is come to this 4 dots, which says style. You click on it, and it says effect styles. You have this book icon, which is more like your library. Um, Forget all of those for now. It's a bit advanced. And it says that you have no style effects right now. So what you can do is click on the create style, right? So it says create new style, new effect style. So I can call this shadow. I'm gonna use the slash for now, and I'll explain why the slash is good. You would see it in a bit. So shadow slash, this is 0. So it says 0 pixels. You can give it any name you want, but I'll call it shadow slash 0 pixels, and I click on create style. Yeah. So we'll come to the next one, and this is 10 pixels. That is the Y value. We're talking about the Y value now because we didn't touch the X value. Can you all see what I'm doing? It seems some people can't. What is the problem? Okay, means the majority of people can see it. So those that can't, you should probably join again, I guess. Yeah. So this has the value of 10. Unfortunately, I'm on Figma, so I can't zoom in on this particular panel. Neither can I zoom in the entire app because it's not in the browser. This is a desktop app. So this has the Y value of 10, right? So I can call this. So you click on the 4 dots, which says styles. And you can see that the style we created for this 0px shows up here. And because we gave it shadow slash 0px, that shadow, it's kind of like a folder, right? So if you go to your, let's say, your Windows browser, for example, let me show it to you so you understand what I'm saying. So, okay, fortunately, you can see my Windows browser. So, yeah. So, for example, your window browser can be something like local disk. You would see slash documents, for example, documents slash my secrets slash don't read. You understand? This is the way our PC works or the Windows works. And this is a folder called my disk. When you open this folder, you see another folder called documents. When you open this folder, you see another folder called my secrets. Then when you open my secrets, this could be a file called don't read, right? So that's the way it works here. So if I call this, let's bring it back here. So if I call this shadow and I don't put the slash in front, I just call it 10px, you would see what happens, right? So if I come back to this, you would see that shadow 10px is in a different group or folder compared to this because I didn't use the slash. But the plan is to make both of them in the same group. So what I can do is come back here, which is the shadow 10px, click on this, which is the edit style, right? And easy, put the slash between both of them, and you're done, basically. And you can see it drops down to this, right? Are we still following? Good. I assume we're following. So coming to the third one, which is easy, it has y value of 15. So click on this once more, add the plus style, click the plus, not add the plus style. So shadow slash 15 px, and you have it stored. How does this help my life and my shoe size? Let's say I have another frame, I'm designing something, and I have a card. I draw a rectangle, right? And yeah, what I did was just Alt V slash H, Alt plus V, then Alt plus H. What that does, it aligns the card, right? So if it's here, I want it to be in the center, Alt VH, or Option B VH if you want to mark, right? So I change this to white, for example. I don't have to create the shadow again because I have it in my local style, right? So I click on the 4 dots and automatically I can see 3 shadow options, right? And I can click on this and it gives it to me. I don't have to create it over and over and over, right? I can say I want 15, give it to me, 0, gives it to me. That's the good thing about the local style, right? And you can do the same thing for your, how do I make it white? Okay, let me go back. Yep. When you click on anything, it could be the frame, it could be the box, right? Right now I'm on this box, and if you look at this side, this panel has to do with everything, color, everything, typography, that's fonts, everything, effects, and blah, blah. And this has to do with your layers. So right now, this rectangle, it's inside of this frame, right? So if you look at the panel, it says frame 4, and we have the rectangle inside. That's why it's aligned. What is it called in coding? When you move your, I forgot what it's called. I can't remember, sorry. You still can't see what I'm doing. Interesting. So yeah, it's moved, like, you know, when you do a paragraph, something like that, yeah. So if I add a different rectangle, you can see it keeps moving underneath this frame. And if I collapse this frame, can you see? It shows me what is inside of it. So, yeah, back to this rectangle, you can see the color over here. You can either click this, select the color you want, or if you know the X code, you can just type it, right? So white is FFF or 6 Fs. And if you type in one letter in Figma, it automatically fills it for you. So if I type in F, Figma assumes I want 6 Fs, right? So it changes it to white for me. And yep, the effects, all I have to do is come to the style icon and click on it. I get this, right? So if I click any of them, I get the effect we created over here, right? Because I saved them as local styles. And I was going to say the same thing goes for your colors. So if I say, I want to save my colors, because when you have a bigger design file, you would have like different colors from different places, and every color you use is going to appear under here, right? But there are times you would have like similar colors. So for example, just to give you a quick example, I might have this color, and let me just reduce this so you can. I might have this color and this one, and you can see it keeps adding the colors to this, right? I have this color. So the more colors you add, the more you see it. So right now I have 4 different colors selected, and that's why it says click plus replace mixed content, because they all have different colors, right? So if I hit on the plus, before I do that, before I hit on the plus, you can see something called selection colors, right? So this lets you know that you've selected some different colors together, and these are the colors you've selected. So you can decide to change any of them from here instead of hitting the plus. But let's just hit the plus for now. So once you hit plus, it gives everything the same color, right? But we don't want that for now. Yeah, so I just want to show you guys something. So let's go with black, kind of like a black or dark gray. And we put this like this. We'll put this like this. We'll put this like this. Yep. So we have different colors right now, and you can see everything over here. So the problem is, if I'm deep in my design and I'm trying to remember the red I used for something, maybe to show an alert or to show danger, right? And I come here, it might be difficult to tell because all this shows me is the color, but I really can't remember, especially if you have this color and this color, which is this two, which are somewhat similar to each other, right? It might be difficult to tell which one you used, and that's where the style comes in. So I can click on this just the same way we did for the shadows, come to the style, right? And ignore this. These are like Figma's colors, sort of. You can turn them off, but I'll teach that later. You click on the plus as usual, and we can say this is, let's call it red, for example, or pink or something like that. So we can say pink, give it a slash, right? And we'd say, I don't know, you can call it anything, but let's just call it light for now. Let's call it light or lighter, something like that. Yeah. And you create style. And you can see if I click on this, it doesn't have a style, but once I do this, can you see it has the pink folder sort of with this? And if I hover over it, it says lighter, right? So let's do the same thing for these other colors. So we'll call this pink slash light. We'll call this, is this still pink? Can we still call this pink? Yeah, let's say pink slash dark, for example. And we'll call this, I made a mistake there, but yeah. Let's just call this pink slash pinky red, something like that. Yep, so that means we've created a style. So if I don't click on anything on the frame, you would see this tab changes a bit. So you can see right now I have color styles and I have pink as a group. And when I click on the drop down, you see what we've created: lighter, light, dark, pinky red. Another thing you can do is this. So remember I said you might forget which is which in terms of you don't know which color you used for the alerts, for example, and fine, you have light, you have lighter, but then you're not sure, right? So you can add a description and says for lighter, you can say use this for um, an error alert background, right? This makes you remember. And you can say for the pinky red, for example, you can say use this for an error text. The reason why this helps is because when someone else comes into your file and wants to assist you with designing. The person doesn't need to ask you all the time, hey, what's up? What's the color for the error text, or what's the color for the alert? All the person needs to do is, for example, draw the rectangle and says, oh, I need a color for an alert. Comes into the style, and once he hovers over it, you see lighter, use this for an error alert background. Straightforward. You can make it a list view as well. So it's easy to, not like it's easier, but I prefer this just to change the views. And if you hover over this, it says use this for an error text. So it makes, life easier for everybody. I don't need to ask anybody questions. I know what I'm supposed to do. So I click on the effect. I see this, use this for an error text, and boom, you have it. Straightforward, right? Do you understand up to this point? Any questions so far? Okay, everyone says yes. Ah, perfect. Okay, that means I'm doing something right. Okay, awesome. So let's, store styles for this. Then we enter into components proper, right? So let's call this, thank you. Let's call this, since they are all neutral colors, we call it neutral. So neutral slash dark, or yeah, let's say dark for lack of words. So whenever you start a design, it's good to, have this, store your style, store your colors. We'll call this, I don't know, gray, for example. It's good to give them names that's easily understood by everyone, but just forgive me for today for lack of words. Let's call this light gray. And we'll call this lightest gray. Yeah, for lack of words. Lightest. Is the slash the only way? Yes, I don't think I know of any other way. Yeah, the slash is the only way. Yeah, there's no other way. Yep, so I can say, okay, I want to design a disabled card, for example. How do I know what to use? So you can come in here, edit style, right? If you're not getting this, you can select what you want, then click on it, then right click, edit style, delete style, right? That's if you don't select anything, you get this view and you can edit the style directly. But once you select on it, you click on it first, then right click, edit styles, right? So you can say use this for use this for body text, for example. What body text means is the text that appears the most on your website. Sort of, yeah. Yeah, that's what I'll call it. It appears the most on your website. You have headers, you have body, you have labels, but that's for another day. So let's just say use this for body text. And I can say use this for this one. Oh shit, I changed it. Yep. So use this for the lightest gray. You can say use this for disabled background. It could have different uses, you understand? So you can put all of those here. Use this for disabled background. You can say use this for, I don't know, thinking of something. Use this for something, I don't know. Don't write something, sharp, but you get what I'm saying. Yeah, so when you tap on this and I want to design a, yeah, so when you tap on this and you want to design a disabled card, for example, and you hover over, this says light gray. This says use this for disabled background. So I click on it. And for the text, all I do is come here and it says dark. I think I didn't save this, but yeah, you get what I'm saying. So let me check. I don't think I saved that. Yeah, it didn't save. So use this for body text. Texts. Yeah, so when you hover over it, you should see it. Yeah, use this for body text. So yeah, something like that. You understand? So yeah, that is local styles. You can do this for shadows. You can do this for your text as well. So you have a text of 12, line height of auto. This is line height. This is like letter spacing, paragraph spacing. So whatever you put here, this is out of topic, but because I'm teaching local styles, you can always come here to save it, click the plus, give it whatever name you want to give it, use the slash to make your stuff more organized, and you know it works. You can do the same thing for, what else do we have? For your text, you can do the same thing for your stroke, right? You can save it. You can do the same thing for your effects. I told you we have drop shadows, inner shadows, layer blur, and background blur. You can always experiment with this later on, and you can save it as well. So let's talk about components, right? And which is like the last thing on the list. Let's go back to the button, right? The button. So, like I said, this is the content, and so when you want to measure, I told you you hold Alt, yeah, and you see the spacing around, right? So 8888, which is the padding. Just a recap for people who missed it. There's the content, the spacing around the content is the padding, the spacing around the entire content or the entire button in this case is the margin, right? And if you look at these, for example, you have the design, prototype, and inspect. Inspect, you would see it here. It says padding 8px, right? Makes sense? Yep. And it shows you the code as well, padding 8px. You can see it here. And the reason why I got that particular, what happened? Can you guys still see my screen? I think something just, no? Okay. Can you see it now? Okay, awesome. I don't know why that happened, but okay, perfect. Sorry, I'm just trying to adjust. Yeah, so I was saying the reason why this was able to show me the exact padding is because I used something called auto layout, right? I'm not going to teach auto layouts today, but what auto layout does for you is if I draw a regular rectangle, right, and I put in a text, button 1, I put this in here, right, and I group this together. So right click and where's the group? Yeah, group selection, which is Control G, right? It's fine as a button, but as you can see, it doesn't show me the padding. You understand? But if I click on this, it shows me the pattern, right? The same thing will happen if I convert this to a frame. So if I right click and I choose frame selection, I don't get that option as well. Of course, it's not for you, it's for the developers, but what auto layout does for you is, for example, if I keep typing button 1 is a button, you can see the text moves out of this. And if you have a lot of buttons or a lot of designs, you don't want to keep doing this all the time, like having to adjust all of these, to make your changes. Then you have to make sure it's like the same padding around or something like that. It's like a total waste of time. And that's where auto layout comes in. So to use auto layouts, I'll just give it a tip, right? So button 1, all you have to do is right click and add auto layouts. And this shortcut is called Shift A, right? So Shift A, and you can see, looking at the layers panel, can you see my mouse cursor? Looking at the layers panel, it says button 1, but once I hit Shift A, it changes it to a frame 5, right? And automatically you get the padding. Yeah, right? So if you come back into the design panel, you can see there's a new section called auto layout and resizing. Yeah, let me undo. You don't have it. Redo. Once I hold Shift A, you get it again, right? And you can always play around with this, padding around the items. So if I increase this, you can see it increases the space inside the button. Oh, what is going on? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Can't see my screen again. Okay. I believe you'll be able to see it now. Okay. Okay. What did you see last? What did you see? So I can start from there. What did you see? It's off. Can't you see my screen again? Oh, but I'm sharing my screen. Okay, let me stop sharing and share again. Can you see it now? The screen is not showing. Okay, it's showing now. Awesome. Yep. Okay, let's go back. Let me repeat. Yeah. So talking about developers and padding, right? You remember what padding is? The spacing between, the spacing around, not between, the spacing around the content. So right now, if I hold Alt, it shows me that I have 8 pixels from the top, 8 pixels from the left and right, and 8 pixels from the bottom. And if I click on the button and I go to the inspect panel, right, it shows me that the padding is 8 pixels. And this is good for developers because they can see the CSS code and it says the padding is 8 pixels, right? But if I just draw a rectangle, which is what a lot of people would do, like when starting out, and I type in like the text button 1, right? And of course, I want to group this together. What I did was Alt VH. Remember I told you about Alt VH? So you select both of them, Alt VH, it aligns it. If this was a frame, you don't have to select both of them. All you have to do is select the child component, which is the content itself, and Alt VH, right? Awesome. Yeah, so coming back to this, if I select both of them and I group them as a selection, I don't get to see the padding around here, right? The same thing happens if this is a frame. So if I select both of them or just this one, or anyhow you want to do it, you can select just the rectangle, right click and frame selection, right? It changed the rectangle, it moved the rectangle into the frame, but right now the button is not in the frame, right? And you can see that from this place, from the layers panel. So you have a frame, which is this one. Yeah, that's the that's the auto layout I'm talking about. So this is a frame and the button is not inside. So if I click on the button and I drag it into the frame, you can see if I collapse this, it collapses both of them, right? So Alt VH and it puts it in the center. So looking at the frame, you still don't get the padding. Now the padding is not for you, like I said, it's not necessary for you. But the good thing about auto layout is that for this frame, if I begin typing, you can see it doesn't expand. And can everyone still see me? I know can't see me for some reasons. If you can see me, just let me know in the chat box. Okay, fine. So it doesn't expand. So that means for every button that has a longer text, something longer than button 1, I would have to increase this all the time, which is stressful in the long run. But with auto layout, all I have to do is type in the name, maybe register now, and hit Shift A or right click and add auto layout, right? And you can see automatically it says auto layout added, and you can see it has 8 pixels around it, right? And I said you can play around with the auto layout settings, which appears once you add the auto layout. So this says is the padding around the items, and this shows you the padding for each side. So you can say you want the left and right to be 20, you want the top and bottom to be 12. You understand? You can play around with this, but we're not talking about auto layout for today. I just need to mention it. And if I have a longer text, longer than button 1, you can see it increases, the background increases with the text, and that makes sense. So let's go into components and variants before we run out of time. Sorry? Yep, so can that person mute? It's, okay, so now we have a button, and we want to make another button from this button. Yeah, please, if you can mute your mics. So we have one button, and on websites, when you hover over something, you see like a different state. What I mean by different states is some buttons are dark. How do I duplicate the box? I mentioned this before. You can click on what you want to duplicate, hold Alt and drag, right? You can drag it. But once you hold down Shift alongside, it snaps to where you're duplicating from. So it makes it easy, right? Or you can just Control D and it duplicates for you, right? Easy. And with Control D, if I do this, hold Alt, Shift so that they're on the same line, right? Then I Control D, it gives you the exact spacing between each one. Make sense? Perfect. So yeah, I was talking about hovering, and when you hover over a button, buttons have like different states. You have like default states, you have active, not active, you have default, you have disabled, you have hover, you have focus, you have press. They are different. They sound like jargons now, but you'll see what I mean in a minute. So let's assume this is our primary button, for example, and we'll call this primary, and I'm going to use the slash naming convention that we used before. So primary slash, we'll call this default, right? I'll just copy this, and we want like an hover state. So when we hover over this button, we want something to happen. And what I mean by hover is when the mouse enters like this area, right? So let's give it a different color. Right now, I want to give it like a darker yellow, sort of, something like this. Yeah, something not too much. Yep, we've not stored any styles for yellow, but assuming we have, all I have to do was come here, look for the yellow folder if it's created one, and choose the one we want. So double click on the frame name, and we'll call this primary/hover. And let's create one more. Let's call it primary disabled, just for example purposes. And remember, we created styles for disabled. Yeah, you're lost. Where are you lost, Alex? If you can type a bit fast, so I can, move on. Is any other person lost? Okay, let me just recap. So you remember we did the slash naming thingy with the color styles and the shadows. You remember that, right? Okay, you remember we did that. So I'm doing the same thing for the buttons. So like I mentioned, in your websites, whenever you visit a website and you hover over a button, right? It has a different state. Okay, you know what? Let me show you a typical website and probably you would understand better what I'm saying. I know you can't see my screen for now, but you would see it in a minute. Okay. Thank you, Topware. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and share again. So, yep. So share screen one. Can you all see my screen? Awesome. So what I'm saying is buttons have different states. So looking at this button, start learning for free. This is the default state which we've created here. Default, as an example, right? And once the mouse enters the button, the color changes. That is the hover state, HOVER, right? And we're trying to do the same thing. So we're saying this is the current color, but once the mouse enters the button, the color changes a bit to like a darker color. Do you understand now? Awesome, right? And because they are from the same buttons, we decided to call one primary/default using the same slash convention naming, like the naming convention we used. So we're saying all these buttons over here are primary buttons, right? This is the default button when the mouse hasn't entered it. This is shift. We're saying this is the hover state, caps lock. This is the hover state, and this is the, want to call it the disabled state. Yeah, but disabled means you can't click it, and this still looks clickable. So we can change this. Remember, we stored something. We said use this for disabled background, and we're using this for disabled text, right? But I think for better to make it look more disabled, yeah, this looks more disabled, but yeah. Why does the color change? It's interaction, basically, to make the web is not static per se. You have a lot of interactions. You can compare this website to let's say lipsum.com. Which one looks more appealing to you? This is just a static site, but even this has some kind of interaction. So once I hover over the link, you can see it changes to red. Rita, can you see it? It's interaction, right? This lets you know, okay, this is clickable, because if it doesn't change, if the color doesn't change, and if the cursor doesn't change from a pointer to a hand, you wouldn't know that it's clickable, and that's bad user experience and bad accessibility design. You understand? Same thing goes for this one. We all know this is a button, but if the color doesn't change or the cursor doesn't change from a pointer to hand, you might think it's not clickable. Do you understand that? So that's the reason for the color change. And why are we giving the style names at the top and not at the right like others? Yes, that's because they are not, this is not an individual element. There's something in design system, or let me say in chemistry. In chemistry, you know what we call atoms, you know what we call molecules, you know what we call organisms and the likes. And we know the atom is the smallest element. Molecules are made from atoms, sort of, and organisms are from molecules, right? So an atom is this text. It's a standalone element, right? And because it's a standalone element, you get to change whatever you want. Yeah, you can change the color, you can change the text, you can change the stroke. But now it's not just a text, it's a text with a frame, right? So there are two elements together. You can't hear me? Can anyone hear me? Awesome. Okay. So it's two elements together, and there is really no place for you to add like a button, sort of. I don't know if you get me. So this is a molecule because it consists of number one, a color, which is yellow, and it consists of a text, right? So two elements coming together is more like a molecule, right? So that's why we have to name the frame. That's why we have to name the frame. Okay, so moving on, we can say we want like a secondary button. So there are different types of button. It's most like secondary, primary, some call them like ghost button. We have primary school, secondary school, tertiary institution. That's naming convention I'm using. So for this, we can, just copy and paste duplicates basically, right? So we're kind of like forming a table. So we have primary button. This is primary default, primary over, primary disabled. Yeah. So for the secondary button, we can say we want it to look this way. And what I did was Shift X, Shift plus X. And what that does is it swaps your fill for your outline, your fill for your stroke, right? So right now, the fill is yellow. This is the fill color, but we don't have any stroke. So if I press Shift X, right now we don't have any fill, and now we have a stroke. So they swapped. You can see it's just a great shortcut. Did you get that? Did anyone get that, or are you lost? Shift plus X. Miriam, what didn't you get? Repeat. Okay, fine. Awesome. Let me repeat. Right now, we have a fill. What I mean by fill, the background color is yellow, but we don't have a stroke, right? This is a stroke. If I click on the plus button, it gives me a black stroke, right? But we don't have a stroke at the moment. If I select it and press Shift X, it inverts it, right? So it gives the stroke the color of the background, and the background takes the color of the stroke. So let's assume we have a black stroke. If I click Shift X, you can see what happens. It just inverts it. So black becomes the fill and yellow becomes the outline. Easy peasy. You can watch what is going on here between these two, fill and outline. You just swap in. Was that easy to understand? Yeah, the stroke is the outline. They're basically the same thing. Yeah. Stroke outline is the same. Yeah. Yep. Perfect. So we can say we want the secondary button to look this way. And for the other state, we do the same thing. we just swap. But to make it more, maybe just for example purposes, we can give it the same color with the outline. I don't know if it's this one. This is bad, but let's leave it this way for now. You don't need a summary list for the shortcuts. Sometimes all you have to do is right click. I don't know if it's here. Or you can come here. I can't remember where it is. But yeah, whatever shortcut you need is in the menu. You don't need to like cram it or something. Shift X. I can't find where it is right now. But yeah, you can see most functions have shortcuts. They all have shortcuts. You just have to remember or just, do it manually. You get me? So yep. I think I need to move a bit fast. Let's change this to this color for, but it's bad design. But forgive me for that for now. And we do Shift X for this, right? So remember, these are secondary buttons. We call them secondary, and you'd have to change this from primary. You see that you double click on the name, which is faster, or you come to the layers panel. It says primary/default. We have to change it to secondary. Secondary/default. I think I will stop at 11:30 so we can take like questions and can answer everyone's question, because this can go on and on and on and on. So I'm just renaming to secondary slash whatever. So now we want to create the components. These are not yet components. For the colors, when we did the slashing thing, we get the whatever is called on the side, right? So when you select an element or a molecule, and let me not teach you the shortcut right now. You can come to this part, this 4 diamonds, it says create components, and you can see the shortcut says Ctrl-Alt-K, right? So when you tap on it, you can see what happens. It gives it a purple outline, and you have this, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but there's a little 4 diamonds, like a diamond, and it's filled like solid color, right? And you can see it here in the layers panel. It shows that this is now a component, primary/default, and it's in purple compared to the rest, which have like 2 lines, secondary/default. You understand me? And if we do the same thing for this guy, you click on this or Ctrl-Alt-K, you see it changes from, look at the layers panel, it changes from these 2 lines, which is an auto layout frame, to, oh, I think I stopped sharing my screen again. Sorry, forgive me. I believe you can see my screen now. Yep. For some reason, the shortcuts in Figma is it's clashing with the shortcuts with this particular app. I would explain what a component is, don't worry. So you can see this is just 2 lines with the name primary/over. But once I click on create component, it changes to the purple text with purple blah blah. Yeah. So what a component is basically is somewhat similar to the styles we've been creating, the colors, the text, the shadows we created. And we do that because we don't want to keep recreating buttons, for example. Buttons is just one component. But say, for example, I've created this button, and tomorrow I want to start another design for the same company, right? I don't have to create this button again. All I have to do is import this component from this file to that file, right? Using an asset library. I'm speaking gibberish now, but all you have to understand is that you're creating this so that you can reuse it over and over and over. It will make sense in a minute. Trust me, it will make sense. You can't find the create components option. That's strange. Just at the top, select an element first. If you don't select anything, you won't see it. All you see is drafts/untitled. So you select an element, and if it's not a component, you will see it like this one. You will see it there. Can I get rid of this? Yep. So when you select, you see it up here. Okay, perfect. So instead of doing it one by one, you can select everything, right? So I've not created components for these buttons. So when you select everything, now it has a drop down. You can see create components. If you click on create components, it makes everything one. So you have just one component. Can you see? It has, and that's not what you want. So it's grouped everything together. And a component is a frame, right? I should have explained the difference between frame and a component is basically a frame. You understand better. I'll probably explain well in the next class because we're running out of time. So yeah, you don't want to click that because it selects everything together and makes it one component. What you want to do is create multiple components, right? So we have this, and this as separate components. Now, before I go into variants, I want to explain what I mean by the components. Someone asked that, Yusuf. So if I take this button, right, and I'm holding Alt, I'm creating an instance. It's called an instance of the component, or just see it as a child of the parent, right? So this is the parent and this is the child because I created this from this. And how do you know this is a child? When you look at the layers panel, it's no longer the 4 diamonds. It's just 1 diamond and it's outline. It's not filled. Are you guys still following me? Do you still understand what I'm saying? Perfect. It's not filled. So this lets you know this is an instance. Another way to know it's an instance is when you right click. I don't know what this annotation requests are. When you right click, you would see detach instance. This lets you know it's an instance, right? You can see swap instance, detach instance, go to main component, which is more like the parent component. Okay, I'm going to come again. This is the component we've created, right? This is the master component, or you can call it the parent component. And how do you know it's a parent or master component? It has, number one, purple text. Number two, it has 4 diamonds. If you look at the icon, there are 4 diamonds. Unfortunately, I can't zoom in because it's not on the web. 4 diamonds, right? But once I duplicate this or hold Alt to create a duplicate of this, it changes from the 4 diamonds to just 1 diamond, right? And it's filled, it's outline, like it has stroke. It's not a full color. You understand me? So I called this an instance. That's the right word to use in programming languages. It's an instance of the master component, which is this. This is the master, or this is the parent, and this is the child. You understand me? And another way to know it's an instance or the child is that once you right click, you see this option, swap instance, detach instance, go to master component, or go to main component. But if I right click on this, I won't see anything that has to do with instance in this menu. Do we get that? And why is this good? If I have this button in 2000 places, you mistakenly created a component for all 3 buttons. All you have to do is Ctrl Z, which is undo. Ctrl Z is like everywhere, Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, all applications, Ctrl Z is undo. Is that good, Gladys? It's not good, really. You just Ctrl Z. Ctrl Z is undo. You know, I've created something I don't want to create. Ctrl Z. That's it, basically. You understand? Okay, for you, Gladys, let me go back. So right now, they are not components, right? You can know from these 2 lines and the name. If I select everything and I mistakenly click on the create component, which I don't want, and I Ctrl Z, you're back to where you were before. It's just undo, right? Create multiple components, that's what you want. Okay, moving really fast. Control and Z together, exactly. Thank you, Princess. So, yep. So if I have this particular instance, because you don't have to create this button all the time because you already have this, right? All you have to do is duplicate or alt and drag or whatever. If I have this button, or let me say this button, in 200 places, right, in my design, and the client or my manager comes and says, oh, we have to change the button from yellow to red, for example. Trust me, you don't want to go into 200 buttons to start changing it from yellow to where's red to red. Imagine doing this 200 times. It makes no sense, yeah? All you have to do is come back to this master component. Okay, let me create multiple so you understand what I'm saying or what I mean by having 200 buttons. So I have these buttons. Let's assume these are different places on my app. I created them from this guy, right? And my manager says we have to change it to red. All I have to do is come to the master component. If you forgot where your master was, click on any of the instance, right click, go to main components. It takes you there, right? Go to the master component, change from yellow to whatever color you want, and see everything changes, everything updates at the same time, right? If I decide to change the text, I can hold Control, select the text, or look at the layers panel, just select the text from there. And because black doesn't work on red, I can just change this to white and it updates everywhere, right? They can say, oh, we don't want buttons with sharp corners. What I mean by sharp corners is these are sharp corners. I can say, okay, this part is for corner radius, as you can see. I can decide to increase it to 8 and everything changes. So do you understand the concept of a component now? Who asked that question? Someone asked the question about components. I can't remember who asked, but someone asked about components. But do you understand me so far? Okay, you all understand me so far. Awesome. So I'll use the last 5 minutes to go into variants, right? So let me change this back to how it was before. Can you open another file? Yes, you can, but that would be for a different day, not today. Yeah, because that has to do with libraries and publishing, like your components and all of that. But if you're using a free version, you might not be able to publish. You won't be able to publish components, not might. You won't. All right, so I'm just changing this back to what they were before. Variants. So the way variants works is you have many components, but some of them, you want some of them to be together. So right now I have buttons. I want all these buttons to be together the way we have like pink and we have neutral. They are all in color styles, right? I want them to be together. You can have input fields, but input fields are different from buttons. So you might want to separate your buttons from the input fields, sort of. So all you have to do is select all your components that you want to group together. You can either come, no, not here. If this were not components, you can come to the drop down. You see something called create a component set, right? See that you do that. But if you've created the components already, you can see this option that says combine as variants, right? Select again, everything, combine as variants. And once you tap on that, you get this box around it that lets you know these are now variants. They are grouped together, right? They are now in the same component set. And you can see it says component 1. Let's rename it from component 1 to button, right? So now it says button. And you can see it has changed from that. For the instance, it had a stroked diamond. But right now, because the component set is now the grand, I won't call it a grandparent, but they're now together in one house. So they all took their 4 diamonds, contributed it together and say, you're lost, don't worry, my story is not clear. But anyways, yeah, I've taken all the master components together, I've grouped them together, and they're called variants, and I've renamed it from component 1 to buttons. And forget this for now, but you understand. So these are all the components we've created. So you can see primary default, secondary default, primary over. It has changed the slash to a comma, and you understand why. So right now they are variants. So select this. Let me move this up a bit. Yep, so you can see it. So when you select the frame, can I do it again? Okay, let me go back. Boom. Yes, a variant contains 2 or more components. So when you select all the variants you want to group together, right? So now these are all buttons. It makes sense to group them together. Yeah. When I select everything together, I click combine as variants. Understood? Now, because they are all buttons, it makes sense to rename this, like call it a button, not component 1, so that it's clear to everyone. I'm still explaining variants so you understand what I'm saying. A variant is just a combination of components, basically, right? That's the layman definition. But it's just grouping all the components together, right? So I've renamed it to button. And now that the variant is selected, that is the group is selected, you can see here it says property 1, primary, secondary, property 2, default over, right? I made a mistake in my naming convention, but let's leave it for that for now. So if I say primary, secondary, I can call this type. Just stay with me. I can call this type. So what type of button do I want? So I want you to see it as all these buttons are like when you want to order something, maybe like McDonald's drive or online, you see a lot of pizzas, right? Then you say, what kind of pizza do you want? I want the Italian pizza. And it asks you, do you want barbecue? Do you want chicken? Do you want this? Do you want that? You select what you want, right? And it says, do you want tomato sauce? Do you want that? So you select the sauce you want. And at the end of the day, you get that exact order you've gotten delivered to you, right? So this is kind of like the same thing. Do you want primary button? Do you want secondary button? Those were the names we gave them, right? And we've called them types or button type to be clear. And it says, do you want the default or do you want over, right? Let's call this states. There are different states. So, we have a disabled button, but I think I messed up with the naming convention. And that's why it's giving me this error that says some variants have the same property value applied, change the values to resolve this. So if I select conflicting variants, I can see from here that, so if I select this, this says primary over, secondary over, primary disabled, secondary over. Can you see the mistake I made? So I should have called this secondary disabled, not secondary over. So I can easily come here and change the name from over to disabled. Or I can double click the name in the layers panel. So you can see it has changed the naming convention for us. Before we used disabled secondary slash disabled. But now because we changed that name from property 1 to button type and property 2 to states, it says button type equals secondary, states equals over, but the states should not be over, the states should be disabled. So if I select the component again, it still says there's a conflicting variant. That means one is wrong. This, and you can see it says states over. But remember, I've changed one. Figma for desktop is the same thing on the web browser. Remember, I changed this one from over to disabled. I introduced it. So I don't need to type disabled again for this. All I have to do is select the drop down, choose disabled. So now everything should be fine. Yeah, you might run into issues like this. So I have to just do that. So how does this help my life and ministry? If I select, this is an instance. Yeah, I know it's a lot. I'm really, okay, maybe I'll just take the time to go over variants properly. And if you have any question afterwards, we can, I don't know if Design Power will allow that, right? So if I have this instance, yeah, I'll do it. Just watch. Initially, before we did the variant thinning, right? When I created this instance, all I had to do was, all I could see here was this, the color, I could see the stroke and all that. And when I needed to change something, I didn't change this. I changed this from here, right? But what happens if somewhere in my design file, I'm using this button, which is a child of this one, but my manager comes and says, no, we don't want to use the primary button for this particular place. Let's use the secondary button. I don't have to go back to where I created this, select secondary, copy, go back to my design file and paste. I don't have to do that. Now that they are all invariants, it makes sense because once I select an instance, this button, all I have to do is come here and I can see what button type do I want, similar to the pizza. What kind of pizza do you want? So what kind of button type do I want? Is it primary? Is it secondary? I click on secondary and we have a secondary button, right? And what kind of state do I want? Is it default, over, disabled? I want disabled and I get it. Do I understand? So what variant does for us is it groups all those similar components together such that if I create an instance from any of those components, I can still change that instance to whatever style I want from that group. You all are confused. Okay, let me see if I can do it again, like from the very, 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 very beginning of components. And okay, let me start again. I'm sorry. Forgive my yep. You get what I'm saying? Okay. Okay, I'm going to create fresh components. These are all instances. So I'm going to detach the instance. So right click, detach instance. So we are back to this auto layout frame. Are we good? Do you understand to this point? I'll be asking, so I need to be typing, yes, I understand, so we can move a bit faster. Yes, perfect. So we said these are, I'll just copy and paste this, and then not to waste time. So we are saying these buttons are all primary buttons, yeah? And we're saying these buttons are all secondary buttons, correct? Fine. And we're saying these buttons have different states. So let me copy this. We're saying these buttons have different states. So we're saying this is the default state for the primary button, default state for the secondary button, other state for the primary button, other state for secondary, disabled, primary, disabled, secondary. Do you understand up to that point? So I need you guys to, awesome, perfect. So now they are just called buttons, right? And remember the naming convention we used. We said it's kind of like a folder, right? So you have the folder name slash the content name, right? So this is primary button, the default state. So instead of calling these buttons, we call it primary slash default. Make sense? Does that make sense to everyone? Yep. And this is the over button. We call it primary slash what? Over. This is the disabled button. What do we call it? Can you type that in the chat? What do we call the disabled button? Exactly, primary slash disabled. Awesome. Now this is the secondary default. What do we call this one? Remember, you can call it any name, but these are the proper names in a way. Yeah, that makes sense. So we'll call this what? Secondary, exactly. You all are good learners. So secondary slash default. And we call this is the other state. and we call it what? Secondary slash over, right? And we call this secondary slash disabled. Make sense? Perfect. So right now, they are not components, they are just there. We can't reuse this anywhere. If I create an instance, this is not a component, but if I do this and I decide to change this from yellow to green, it won't affect this one because it's not a component. Make sense? I can hear you all say it makes sense. So yeah, makes sense. So now we have to make them components. Yeah. So select everything. Sorry, select everything. Then remember I told you can do this. Create components, which you don't want to do because that will make everything one component. You can create multiple components, which is fine. So if you click on that, you can see they all have they've all turned purple with the four individual diamonds. And you can see combine as variants. So you see that you do this, or you just select the drop down and say create component sets. Do you understand up to this point? Yes, 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 yes. I need more yeses. Okay, fine. So now that we've created a component set, it's basically a variant. And what a variant does is that it houses individual master components together, right? So this makes sense because they are all buttons. So it makes sense to have everything together, right? And I mentioned, just to let me Control Z, I mentioned that if you create multiple components and I create an instance, say from this, an instance of a master component is basically the child of a parent component. I'm just using different terminologies. Master and instance, or main instance, master, slave, parent, child, DOM, sub, whatever. Yeah, so if I decide to change some button in 1,000 places in my design, right? And then change the button from yellow to green because my manager says we're changing, we're rebranding. I don't have to start changing each individual component from yellow to green, right? All I have to do is come to the master component and select yellow, change it to green, and it updates everything, right? But one thing you should note, I didn't say this before, is that if you change one of the buttons, say for example, I change this from yellow to green, and we want to rebrand, and we want to change all the buttons from yellow to red, watch what happens. It doesn't update this one. That's because we've overridden exactly where you're coming. We've overridden the values of this. So any change we make to the master component concerning color, it doesn't change. But if we change the text, it changes with it. So if you override something in an instance, so in this case, it's overrode the word. We've overridden the color, yeah? So if we update the master color, it won't affect it. Is that clear? Is that clear? Is it clear so far? Okay, perfect. So let me Ctrl Z, Ctrl Z, Ctrl Z. Awesome. So now that we have all these components, let's group them together to make them variants, right? So select all. If you select only two, you will see it's like someone said, it's a variants are basically housing two or more components. But since all these are buttons, it makes sense to select everything. So combine as variants, right? So now they are all in the same house together, right? And instead of calling it component one, it makes sense because it makes sense to call it button since they are all buttons. Do we understand up to this point? The color bit again. So what I'm saying, Ishaoluwa, is that if you overwrite something in an instance, let me show you. Let me just show you. I want you guys to really understand. Yeah, so this is an instance of this guy, right? If I overwrite the text, I change this from this to Jaden, right? If I decide to change the primary component from button 1 to button 1000, it doesn't affect the instance because I've overwritten the text. You get? So if you override anything in an instance and you change the master component, it won't affect that instance. But if I decide to change the color, since I've not touched the color of this instance, if I change the color of this, right, to green, it still changes. But if I change the color of the instance from green to, let's say, this blue, and I decide to change the master from green to red, you can see it doesn't. You get it now. You understand perfectly. So yeah, that's what I meant by that. So now let's combine it. Combine as variants. So now the name is component 1 if you look at the layers panel, but they are all buttons. So it doesn't make sense to call it component 1. Let's just call it button, right? It's good to name your layers. I didn't say that at first, but it's good to name your. Yes, you'd have to change it from the parent if you want consistency across your design, because once you change one and you make changes to the parent, that particular one you changed won't be affected. Do you understand? Yep. So now I've named it button. So I've selected the variant. What if we have like 20 out of 100 instances that we change the color? Why we need to change at the same color? Do I change it? Yes, you'd have to. So that's why you shouldn't change the instances. If you want to make a different, maybe a different design or something, like I want this to be different from the parent components, you have to detach it first, right? So that makes it not related to this guy. It's an outcast, a prodigal son. Override, override, override. So if I right click, you see override. Let me go back to this. Reset all overrides. Can you see this? So it changes back to the way it was at the beginning. So for the 20 instances, you can just, you probably realize, oh, you made a mistake and you shouldn't have overridden some of this stuff. You can just right click and reset all overrides. But mind you, it takes you back to the state. So assuming you've changed the text to like register now and you reset override, it goes back to button 1. Does that answer your question, Ifemi? Show us a website for the variants as an example. You wouldn't see that. It's not visible on the website. It's visible on the, let's call it the backend. Or, for example, if you visit the website, you're not seeing what the designer designed. You're seeing what the developers coded. You get me? So you wouldn't see a website for variants. If a website uses variants, you wouldn't know. If they don't, you wouldn't know. You understand me? So yeah, back to this. So now we've selected the house, right? We've named it button. And because we've combined them as variants, you get this option here. You see variants. So now you see property 1, primary, secondary. What name can we give to primary and secondary, like a common name? I said we can call it type, right? So what type of button do you want? Is it primary? Is it secondary? Then we have another property. I remember we have this separated because we use the slash convention. So you know what we call this default slash, primary slash default, primary slash over, primary slash disabled. That's why we have it like this. If we didn't use the slash, everything would be together in one. And you don't want that. So that's why that slash is very, very important, right? And you can see now that this says primary, secondary, but there's no disabled. That means I didn't name something properly, which is this one. I didn't name it properly, but we get to that. So now we have default, disabled, and over. These are all states. They are called states in the programming world. So we just call them states, or call it state, right? Do you understand up to this point? Okay, is anyone confused? Okay, I assume no one is confused. So it's called state here. And so we don't have disabled for the, okay, yeah, we don't have disabled because these are types. My bad, forgive me, forgive my error. So we have primary, secondary, which is correct for the type, and the state is what default disabled over. Makes sense, yeah? So what does this mean? This means that, remember we still have these instances. They are instances of this guy. Make sense? Yes, they are instances of this guy. But before we made them, yeah, you can have tertiary buttons as well. You can have tertiary buttons as well. So you can call them tertiary, you can call them ghost button. You can call this, sorry for dragging you guys back. You can call this outline or secondary. Then you have tertiary, not slash, but don't use, I'm just, or, yeah. You can call this tertiary or ghost buttons. We didn't create that, so yeah, you get. So it all depends on how you want to name your stuff. It doesn't mean. Yeah. And remember that this guy is an instance of this guy. And normally, for me to be able to change this guy to maybe this guy, I would have to overwrite this instance, like detach it, then make the changes I want to make it look like this. But I don't have to do that anymore because now it's a button. I mean, it's a variant. So if I select this instance, I get this new section that says, what type do I want? Do I want to change it from primary to secondary? Okay, secondary button. Boom, I get a secondary button. What state do I want? Do I leave it in default state or do I want to change it to over disabled? I say I want disabled. I get a disabled button. Does this make sense now? So now this is still an instance of the parent, but it's because I've grouped all the master components together. I have the ability to change that instance to whatever master is in that group. Does that make sense? Yes. Any other person still processing? Mm. Princess Esma. Yes, it's recorded. Yeah, it doesn't matter where the parents are coming from. You can change the instance to whatever, yeah, you get. You can always change primary to secondary. You can always change the state from default to over. I can change this to over state. I can change this to default, change this back to primary. As long as the master component is in this group we've created, it still works. Exactly, as long as you've made them variants. So if I decide to add something, so right now all I'm doing is holding control, or you don't need to hold control, you can just drag. Yes, you can add more buttons. So let's assume you want to create the tertiary one. Yeah, I think this should be the last thing we'll discuss. Then probably in the next class, or if you have questions, you can leave them on the Slack group. So let's assume you want to create a tertiary button. Look, I call them ghost buttons. So all you have to do now is you don't use Alt. No, I think you can use Alt. Let me see. Okay, no, you can't use Alt because yes, you can. Sorry, you can use Alt as long as it's still in the same. It's still within this bounding box. Let me show you what I mean. If I select 3 of them and I take it outside of the bounding box, they become instances of these guys. Can you see it here? Do you understand? Yep. But if I increase the bounding box, yep, and I select them and make duplicates still within the bounding box, they are treated the same way with the full diamond as with the others. Make sense? Awesome. So now we can make changes to what you want to do. So since we call them ghost buttons, just for lack of design or whatever I was going to say. I can say, okay, ghost buttons look like this. You select the text. For easy selection, hold Control and select, or you can just double click, right? Hold Control, select, or double click, right? So to make this more obvious, let's change it from black to this color, like this. Then on hover, we'll change this from, I'm holding Shift X, then we'll make this light and make the text black. I'm just making changes. So when you hover on it, you get this background. Then for this, we'll change this from stroke to, let's say like this, which is basically the same as this, but to give it more, to make it more obvious, I would make it like this. Yeah. So this is our tertiary default, tertiary hover, tertiary disabled. But the names, if you look at layers panel, it still says what? Secondary default, secondary hover, secondary disabled. That means we'd have to rename these elements, right? So there are two ways to do it. You can either select, let me show you the first way. Now I've selected this button, and I told you before, you can double click this, right? So now it says type equals secondary. We want to change that to what? Tertiary. And the state is default, which means it's correct, right? And because I've changed one of these to tertiary, if I click on this button, if I click on this variant, we should still get that error. Some variants have the same property values applied. That's because we've not changed this from secondary to tertiary over, and we've not changed this from secondary disabled to tertiary disabled, right? So if I select the conflicting variants, you can see selected these four because they all have the same name. So I want this to be tertiary over. All I have to do is come here. Remember, we've changed this to tertiary default. So tertiary should appear in this drop down. Boom, tertiary. And this changed to tertiary as well. So if I select the entire group, we shouldn't have that error. So now we have primary, secondary, tertiary. Make sense? So now I can take any of this instance and say, I want this to be a tertiary button. And you have it. Do you understand? Oh, perfect. I think I'll stop here because we've discussed, yes, sure. We've discussed quite a lot. I explained that Akpan, when to use a frame and when to use a rectangle. Well, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. If you're doing a button, for example, use auto layout because auto layout is basically a frame in a way, but it's an adaptable frame. Yeah. So depending on your context, it adjusts or it adapts. But a regular frame wouldn't do that for you. It's all the designs low fit, they are all high fidelity designs. Yep. Ed is about yeah, I know it's quite a lot, and yeah, you can just watch the recording again, and if you still have questions, you can let me know. But are there any questions so far? We've covered quite a lot of things. But yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. So I started with the naming conventions. Or no, I started with shapes. Then I started with naming conventions. You remember? Shadow / 0px. And we're still using that for this. So when we created components, we kept the same naming convention, primary / default, which makes sense. Yeah. And when we went to the colors, we used the same thing, pink / light. And for everything, typography, the same thing. You can say body /12 or something. It's still the same thing. You can say body /12, and you can increase the size to like 18, play around with these settings and call this body /18, right? So once you have this text, for example, and you click on the styles, you see the styles you've created, 12, 18. So I started off with the naming conventions because once you understand how to do this, it's basically the same thing with components. And when we move on to variant, it was still like something really similar. We use the slash because that's what Figma told us to use. Yeah, it makes sense because it treats it like a folder. If you check your Windows, um, let me see my Windows. Can you see my Windows? Can you see my Windows? Awesome. So can you see this? Users, but this is backslash. Figma uses forward slash. So this is users slash Jaden slash download slash video, blah, blah. You guys, you understand me? Yeah, but for Figma, we use the forward slash. You can reach out to me on Slack, exactly just like directories. The name of the book is Refactoring UI. I will send it to the Slack channel. I hope I don't forget, but yeah, I will send to the Slack channel. Can you unmute to ask questions? Design Power, is that possible? Relationship between design system and components. Your design system houses all your components. So components are, design system is made up of components and, every other thing, your colors, your text, your buttons, your input fields, your shadows, your spacing, everything you can think of, your tooltip, your design system houses everything. And yeah, don't worry about design system for now. We're taking it gradually. So probably before the cohort ends, you would know how to, put everything into one design system. I'm just looking at the questions here. So when designing, we'll work on a sheet to create these buttons, then copy and paste on new sheets for the actual UI. Yes, you can do that, but I don't think it's not available for free plan. So if you're using a free plan, you can't publish your components. And what I mean by publish is, so right now, if you look at my system, there's a layer called, or a page or panel called assets, right? And if I can publish this, or if I've published this, like I'm using a paid plan, and I open a Figma file, like a completely different Figma file, and I search for a button, I would see this, right? But if you're on the free plan, you can't publish your components. Does that make sense? You can't publish it. So if I open a new file, let me just show you. New tab, come on. Why is it not switching? Yeah, so if I open a new file and I search for button, no results. That's because I'm on the free plan and I've not published, and I can't publish. But assuming I'm using the paid plan, all I have to do is publish this guy. So I click on this and you see publish, but it won't publish the components. It's supposed to show you like a preview, but that's for another day. So if I'm able to publish this and I open an entirely new file, I'll be able to see the button here and use. So right now I can only use this in this file, right? But I can create more pages and say on page 6 is my mobile app, right? I can easily search for a button. Let me just search again. That's the only components we have. So yeah, and drag and drop, and I can say yes, I want this to be disabled button. You get me? Something like that. Guess I want the button to be, oh, sorry. So yeah, you can use this while in the same file, but unless you're using a paid Figma plan, you won't be able to publish your components. I think I've answered. Alex, can you type your question? I don't know if you can unmute. How can you reach out to me on Slack? Refactoring UI. Thanks, Elizabeth. Okay, I've answered your question. Nice. Forget to send a book. You're driving. We can call this multi-dimensional components. I believe so. Shoulder pads are dropped. We're all learning. Sorry, design pal. I'm just going through the questions. Can you show us a past project Figma and then the live version? Well, every designer has this struggle where you design something great and the developers mess it up. I'm sure Kemi and other mentors can relate to this, but let me show you one. I think that'll be the last. I didn't talk about the grid system just yet. So that would be for, yes, so you'd have to, since you can't publish, you can just copy your entire components into a new file and use it. Yeah. I'm gonna show you guys, which one is it? I think it's this one. Okay. Yeah, so the sad thing about design sometimes is if you don't have developers who are strong, they might not implement your design the way it's supposed to be. So yeah, you face that a lot. And yeah, designers still don't consider developers sometimes. That's why it's good to sync with your developers all the time. Ask them if this particular thing you are designing is possible. It's something I do a lot. You have to ask them, is this possible? Is this going to enlarge the scope of the implementation? Something like that, you get. So it's good to always, talk to developers when designing. It's good to know your developer's strengths. So you don't design something, your manager says we have to implement in 1 month, and what you've designed will take like 3 months to implement. You get me? So, yep. So how can you use this in a design since writing overwrites an instance? I don't understand the LC. Can you send the question again? So the person that asked for where I've used something like this, I don't know if I did it here. Yeah, this was just it's just something small. I have like way bigger ones, but yeah, you can see I've done something similar. I have my default state, I have my other states, my disabled, my focused, and there are 2 buttons. This one is like large, this is like small. And I have my footer because the footer appears everywhere on the website. So it makes sense to make it a component. And I have my nav bar, it appears everywhere as well. And this is just a really, really small one. I didn't make everything here componentized. Like I didn't make everything in this design componentized, but yeah, you get what I'm driving at. And websites, so yeah, this is what the design looks like at the moment. Something like this. And websites looks something like this. Which they really tried to do, which makes sense. It was somewhat similar. Yeah, so you can see it's somewhat similar, not bad at all. So yeah, that's an example of a live design, suppose. The grid system, that would be in a different class. Since we can't publish, I've answered this. How can you use this? Elsie, I said I didn't get your question, so if you can rephrase. Instead of publishing, could you have all your assets and elements on a single page within a file? That's, yeah, like I mentioned, if you design your components in one file, as long as you're using the free plan, you keep your design in that file, just make them into like different pages. So right now you can call this page where we have our components, you can call it components. And when you want to start designing, you can call this design, or maybe it's a website. Understand? So you can just use the components you've created from there. So assets, you can drag your components or whatever into that file. But if you're using a paid version, you can just publish this file. It might be just this components page, publish it, and you'll be able to access it on other files. When creating a design for mobile, how to convert or creating to be usable on PC? That's a different class, talking about responsive design. How can you access the class recording? I'm sure Design Power will give you access to that. you saw something like, yeah, I just mentioned the 4-point grid, but I didn't really explain it. So yeah, that should be a different class. And if you've created a variant and the button is button one, now in the design, you use the instance and you want to rename it to sign up. How do you do that if renaming the button means, yeah, so you've not overwritten the button, or you overrode, I hope that's a good word, is the text. So if you decide to change the color of the master component, it still affects this button you've changed from button one to sign up. But if you decide to change the master component from button one as a text to button two, your instance will remain sign up. It won't change to button two. Do you understand what I'm saying, LC? So it's basically this. These are all instances here of this component. So if I change this to sign up, and I decide to change the master to button two, the other instances get affected, but this wouldn't, right? But if I decide to change the color from yellow to orange, it affects it. So whatever you override on the instance, right, won't be affected when you change the master components, basically. Does that answer your question, Elsie? How much does a paid Figma plan? How much does a paid plan for Figma? I really don't know. I don't pay for Figma. I use my company's plan. They pay, and yeah. But if you want to pay for Figma, it's okay. It might be OBO, so yeah. But I really don't know how much it costs, to be honest. But yeah, it's maybe when you work with a company, you'll have access to a paid Figma plan. With 10 minutes over time, I believe I've answered your questions and all that. Thanks, guys, for attending. I said this was going to be short, but look at us. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed the class, and I'll see you guys in the next class, I suppose. Design power all over to you. You're welcome, guys. Nice.
All right. I'm sure you all enjoyed the class from our mentor. I mean, Jaden actually took his time to explain everything. So even myself, I actually learned all over again, and that is what this field is all about. You keep learning, no matter how good you are. You keep learning. So thank you, Sega. Thank you for the class, and thank you guys for joining on time as well. The recordings will be posted on the YouTube channel, and also for um the material Tega mentioned, please you can share it with them, maybe on the Slack channel or the Slack UI channel, the locked one, or you can, if you can share it here as well, please try to share it with them. All
Yeah,
right.
I would share it on the channel.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
All right, guys, you all have a wonderful week and keep working on your projects. Your projects will be, you would showcase your work. Oh, so keep working on your projects and have a blessed weekend. All right, bye.
Bye. Uh, a video.